have you found yourself, because one thing I've noticed in our community here locally is, it's not sectarian in nature, but like, you'll have the Hanafi masjid, you'll have the quote unquote, Salafi masjid, you'll have like, how have you been able to kind of navigate that world?
As a community, we divide ourselves that way. And so, yes, I had exposure to different groups within the Sunni tradition and different schools of thought and everything like that. And I benefited from all the different ones, but I realized that there is a loyalty to the basis of Islam, right? The Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the teachings of all the scholars that you can benefit from without dividing each other. I'm going to work with everybody. I respect, the perspectives that they're coming from, because you have no choice as human beings but to become diverse. Allah says that. The way He created human beings is that there'll always be diverse and multiple opinions. So can I at least say, maybe don't agree with an opinion? Can I respect that opinion? Is it coming just from a different way of looking at Quran and Sunnah? And so that's what I had to say to myself.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of the Muslimi Experience. I'm your host, Brother Boonaa Mohammed. This is a really fun, amazing podcast where we get to deep dive into the lives of really incredibly amazing Muslims. And today is no exception. We are joined by our guest, Shaykh Abdullah Misra. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. Now, I didn't mention it in the little intro there, but mashallah, you've been a Muslim for 20 plus years.
Almost 23 years.
23 years. Yeah. So, people may not know that you actually are a revert and you converted to Islam 20 plus years ago. So, I want to talk about your journey into Islam, into your journey into studying Islam and studying knowledge. So let's maybe start from the beginning. Where were you born? Where were you raised?
I was born in North York and raised in Markham.
In Toronto, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, for all those non-Torontonians watching.
Yeah, East End. My parents are immigrated from India. My father immigrated in the 60s. My mother came later on in 81. And I grew up in an Indian Hindu family.
Hindu?
Yeah.
So did you have any interaction with Islam whatsoever? Were you like a practicing Hindu? Were you...
I definitely had a spiritual kind of side to me growing up. And I did get into... I tried various different, ways of expressing that. So even in Hinduism, grew up going to the temple, summer camps at the temple, learning about different aspects of Hinduism. And also like trying to find, even within other religions, tried to explore. Muslims, the funny thing is I never really bothered to explore Islam so much. There's such a kind of... an anti-Muslim bias, I think, that's there sometimes in culture, not anyone's fault, but just there's this kind of idea about Muslims in pop culture, in even my Indian background. So I didn't really bother to explore Islam itself, and also Muslims were not necessarily didn't represent their faith that well. So I had Muslims all around me, but we did all the same bad things together. When I was
they weren't the best examples.
They weren't the best examples. They didn't know how to defend their faith. It seemed very rules-based. So that was an issue that didn't make me draw towards it. But I mean, I always grew up around Muslims. Even the first Muslim was like a pediatrician that I had for my whole childhood. And anytime she would give me a vaccine, she would say, Bismillah. Wow. Of course, we don't know what that means. We don't know anything about that. But just throughout life, I had a Muslim babysitter growing up. Couple of Pakistani friends, things like that.
So there wasn't any like clear prejudice or anything against Muslims, but you saying like, I know, especially in India right now, we hear a lot of the hostilities that are, Muslims and Hindus.
Yeah.
And, did you see any of that tension growing up, even in your own community, in your family?
Yeah, you definitely hear it, because there's sometimes among some of the people in the community, there is a type of a historic anger, towards Muslims. And I think that kind of plays over into how they see Muslims today in our times. And of course, as well, it's like I said, Muslims today don't necessarily represent their faith in the best of ways. So sometimes that, focus on rules or strictness may come across differently to someone who's not a Muslim.
Yeah. So you were kind of a practicing Hindu. You said you went to the temple, you would kind of engage with it.
Yeah.
Where did that shift happen? I mean, let's kind of paint a picture, and like when did that jump of faith occur when you decided that you wanted to look into religion or Islam specifically?
So that there's many years between me coming to Islam and me starting my spiritual journey, because when I grew up in the temple, I was very much into spirituality. At one point, though, I could not explain certain aspects of the religion that I was born into, because they weren't matching with kind of my modern sense of logic and science and these things. And so I realized that there's very good teachings, but the way that they're being explained as the stories and the mythologies, I felt that I could not accept that, even though the teachings are very good, generally speaking. And I've appreciated that from different religions. All religions, they have a general idea of morality and these types of things, respect for other people, praying to the higher being. But the way that that's explained is often through types of, traditions and mythologies that my mind couldn't accept. So actually, for a very brief period, I became an atheist. I tried it because that was what was in vogue, as you're coming up as a teenager.
Yeah.
Then you start hearing about this. But I very quickly left that because my best friends growing up were evangelical Christian. And they actually later on went into some missionary type of work as well. And so they introduced, they came up to me, they said, Anik, because that's my birth name. They said, I think you need a religion. Because they saw that I was kind of, so I said, okay, what are you talking about? So they gave me a Bible. I still have that Bible. And I did start exploring, reading through the Bible, the Old Testament, which is what they call the Hebrew Bible as well, and then getting into the New Testament and getting into trying Christianity. And so I did go through a journey exploring Christianity as well, and that's what really introduced me, I think, it was a precursor to Islam, because it introduced me to one God, introduced me to the idea of prophets, which, coming from a background that is, somewhat polytheistic in its popular expression, coming to the monotheism of the Old Testament, it's very, very refreshing and very nice. So you hear that voice of God, the definitive voice of God. And then later on, as you get into it, then the next kind of bridge was learning about Jesus for me, and falling in love with Jesus. It's just you can't help but fall in love with a human being like that. The only problem that came was at the end of your exploration, and I loved going to church with my friends and these types of things. There was this pressure to make Jesus the same thing I had been leaving, coming from Hinduism, which is the idea of a divinity, creation as divinity. Whereas I saw, in the Old Testament, there's a very nice separation. So it was something that logically, I didn't actually feel that the Old and New Testament logically continue from each other. But that doesn't mean I wasn't exploring other things as well. So I was exploring a Hindu kind of cult sect, in which there was a man, a guru, who declared himself God himself. So it was like, it's very confusing, because you're looking for spirituality and you want good values, but also while your heart is satisfied with good values, you have to satisfy the mind for logic too. So you can have good values in many different places, but then when you see like someone declare themselves God, but they don't tell you that in the beginning, it's very slow. You get into it, and it goes from being, good teachings to we foster all religions. And then this is a spiritual teacher to like, actually, this person's claiming to be God. And then you realize that, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. Whether it's Jesus, who I fell in love with, whether it's a man God or a guru, who's declaring himself that way, it's completely different than the one God that you hear in the Torah, the beginning of the Bible, and the one God that you've always known since you've been born. It's the voice. And you can't really put that voice into a face or a picture or a person, but that voice is still deeper inside. And you just keep saying, no, it's not that. He's not that. He's not that.
Yeah. It's like the fitra is like calling you.
Yeah, it just tells you something inside. Like, it's like, okay, this God can't just be this, this defined, created type of thing. So you keep searching, because you're like, something's not fitting in that picture, even though there are many good things. So you stay for a while, and then you're not satisfied, and then you kind of move on.
SubhanAllah. I have a bit of a theory. I mean, I feel like a lot of indigenous religions or previous religions, obviously they have inclinations of tawheed built within them, right? A lot of times, like, and I don't know if this is the case with Hinduism, maybe you can explain some of it, but like, some people will say, like, even in my culture, in the Oromo culture, we have an indigenous religion called Wakafeta, which is the belief in one God, literally. It
Right.
means like the belief in one God, right? But it's an indigenous religion, it's practiced and over time, obviously, it's changed. And,
Right.
do you see any remnants of Tawheed or the basic principles of Islam within a religion like Hinduism, maybe in original teachings?
100%. 100%. When you look at Hinduism, is actually a collection of different beliefs and religions. So the idea of like a one label called Hinduism, it's not even a word that is necessarily indigenous to India, and it's actually, Hindu beliefs are very diverse, and it's not all kind of like the very kind of crass polytheism that people think it is sometimes. There are different strains. So there is an idea of going back to one source, or one kind of, they call it the Godhead in some places. So before all of these, before all of these kind of manifestations, as they call it, take place, and the avatars and the different forms, then it goes back to this one source that is the ultimate reality, that is, they believe, is formless, and so there is that strand that is there, but it's not the one that's practiced when it comes out into real life, or the one that developed. So in early Hinduism, you do have teachings in the Vedas, which is their really ancient scripture. It's not the scripture that people read now, but you do have glimmers of that idea of what we would call a monotheistic God speaking, but not so much in a very personal sense. It's in a very kind of detached sense. That being said, I do have a belief now that all religion that claims to represent a higher being, it is, in the end, no one can try to even talk about God, Allah, unless there was some snippet of truth, right? Like, how could you even know God except He gives you permission to even say His name, right? So I think that all of these religions started out with just the basic fact that Allah exists, Allah is one, and however, without that guidance or that revelation, traditions come in to every single different, like, indigenous religion, what we call, and it just comes in with slowly changing the belief, slowly representing, okay, in order to remember God, we'll do this, and then we'll do that, and then it becomes a story and a myth, and there's no preservation of what the original teaching was, because the original teaching can also get, the idea of just one God. Some people want something very tangible, because of the materialistic mindset, like, where I can't see Him, I can't, so let's make a representation. Or there's a very holy person who you feel is close to God, and after they pass away, then you say, well, let's just try to remember them in some way. And then eventually it becomes, rather than saying that this person was devoted to God, saying maybe they have an aspect of God in them, but because your beliefs have not been properly, your aqidah or your theology has not been formed. So then you begin to assign different false beliefs and mythologies to the truth. And then that's how you have different religions in the world.
So let's talk about your journey. You kind of are in and out of different, versions of spirituality, exploring a little bit of Christianity now. So you've had this pretext to Islam with Christianity. What kind of happens next?
So at that point, I realized that there was a pressure in some ways to accept Jesus as the Son of God. And I really love this person of Jesus, but I'm like, I just can't do that, because that's the same reason I didn't want to worship any other object. And Jesus is very much in the Bible. He very much is expressing himself as a servant of God and a prophet of God. So all of a sudden, I feel like, okay, well, if I can't find something satisfying, I'm just going to have to, be a spiritual surfer and go wherever. But you just don't know what the truth is. And I had also left that guru kind of cult sect in Hinduism as well, realizing that I'm not getting the truth out of it until I get into university. And that's when I meet some more Muslims.
What school did you go to?
University of Toronto, Scarborough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's when your mind starts to expand, because you meet a lot more people, and then there's a whole story about that as well.
Oh, well, we got to hear the story. What was UTSC like?
UTSC was interesting because, for the first time, it's university life. It's like college campus life, which is, there's no one watching you. you're just there. You can do whatever you
You
want.
can skip class.
Yeah, I mean,
You're
that's one of the
you're the
things,
one
yeah.
paying for it. So
Right, exactly, yeah. So you just have, the limits are off, the restrictions are off. So my first year was a wild year, not something that I would describe now too much as a Muslim, but it was a wild year, and I went all over the place, doing all kinds of things, trying all kinds of things too. And one of the things was that I met people who I probably would not have met had I been in my old context of a very kind of, I grew up in Markham, a very brown, Desi, Indian, Pakistani type of environment where this is what you are culturally. We're Canadian, but we also have our background.
Sure.
So you're very much culturally in one lane.
Mm-hmm.
And you have people that of different backgrounds, but they're very much in their lane. When you get to university, you start to sometimes open up your entire sense of what makes you and your identity. And that's where you can explore a little bit outside of your boundaries in many, many different things. Some things wrong, some things that are good. Mm-hmm. And that's how it started.
So I mean,
okay,
because I feel like something crazy happened here in the background that you're maybe you don't want to get too much detail. We got to hear the deets, Sheikh.
No. I can talk about it now. You know why? Because it's been 20 plus years.
Statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations is gone. Actually, you know what it is? Is that the uncles that I thought would judge me on both sides, they are now very, very elderly. Right?
They're not even here anymore.
They're not. Yeah. I mean, they're not in the pictures. There's no sense of this, what will the community say?
Right.
So in the beginning, it was very difficult, especially going from the Hindu community is very much like the Muslim community in terms of its family structures and what do people say, and judgmental. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's very much like that. A lot of tradition, a lot of conformity in some senses expected. So basically, I went down a route that is also not considered. It's not typical, but it's also not considered respected in the Hindu community, right? Which was that I never wanted to explore Islam seriously, even though I explored every other religion, because of my biases towards it that were nothing to do with against Muslims. So I love Muslims. Like, I had friends who were Muslims, but I just didn't want to get into their theology because of certain things that I'd been taught. This is how Islam is. And I thought I knew Islam until I met a girl. And this girl, first week of university, we met, and we're all in a friends group. So it's nothing like sparks flying right away or nothing like that. But it's very much like she was a Muslim girl from a very practicing Muslim family, from a very knowledgeable Muslim family, one involved in the madrasa system and everything like that. And, not from Canada. She's from away. And I think it was really getting a little closer, like getting admiration and liking for this girl, and seeing that there's a family background as well that's very admirable and very respectable. And I think that is what drew my heart closer to, wait a second, I want to get to know what this person is about. And that's how I began my exploration of Islam, not because of initially, like, I want to explore its spirituality just from a neutral point of view. And the funny thing is that that's something that for many years after I became Muslim, I could not bring myself to admit, because it's really looked down upon in the Hindu community, right?
Like the girl part, or the
idea of like, oh, it was just for a girl, but it wasn't just for a girl.
No, I hear you.
It wasn't, or like the idea of, they call it love jihad. This idea that Muslims they go out. They actually have this myth.
Really?
Not in the entire community, but there's a section of the community that believes that Muslims send their youth out to get involve themselves in romantic relationships with non-Muslims, and then basically like get their hearts attached and then reel them in and say, you gotta convert. That's actually a big myth. I mean, there is aspects of this struggle that the idea of like, okay, a Muslim and a non-Muslim are together, what's going to happen? But complete a lie and myth that it's somehow purposely done.
I don't think I've never heard a case of a Muslim family sending their kids out to lure in non-Muslim kids through like a honey trap.
Yeah, exactly, like a honey trap. Yeah. So this idea, and I've never heard even with like men, because mostly it works with men marrying women.
Right.
It rarely. I mean, I couldn't even imagine it happening the other way too. A woman doing that to a man. So it wasn't the case at all, because my wife wasn't as it wasn't as she was a young person exploring and practicing. I said it's my wife. So that girl then
You ended up getting married. Yeah. Alhamdulillah.
So I gave away the situation.
Yeah.
But basically, what happened was it just made me say, how can you be closed to this idea of the faith of someone that you like, even if they're not representing it in front of you? I think that was what actually allowed me to look into, because I'm like looking at, the family who I got to know from a distance a little bit, through pictures and stuff like that. I'm seeing like these people have big beards, they're wearing niqab and whatever, and very happy though, very happy, nice Muslim family. I'm like, what's that all about?
That's not what I thought was supposed to happen. I thought it was supposed to be upset and
exactly. It doesn't. There's not stern. It's not. So in getting to know the person that I liked, of course there are limits in that too. But in getting to know that person, I said, all right, let me just, because I remember once I was burning a bunch of CDs for her as a birthday present. Back when Napster was around.
Kids, Napster was a no, never mind. Yeah. You can Google it and figure it out.
So basically, you had if you wanted to listen to music, you'd have to burn like tracks.
Yeah.
And so I was making I was just burning a couple CDs.
What were your go-to songs? You got to throw in some Shaykh. What was on this?
So
this love album for your future wife.
So actually, okay, if I have to get into this, it was actually a collection of different in every genre.
Okay.
The top ones. So top in R&B, top in hip hop, top in rap.
You got to give me some tracks, Shaykh.
Top in soft rock. So I was actually a musician before I became Muslim.
Really?
Yeah, into guitar and singing.
Yes.
So for me, soft rock that's what I like.
Give me your top soft rock. What's your go-to karaoke?
Brian Adams.
Brian Adams.
Yeah, I kind of got more into that.
Okay.
Into that boy band as well, like a little bit of that.
Backstreet Boys.
That's 90s, right? Yeah.
Okay.
So a little bit of that. But then also Nirvana, Oasis.
Wow. Okay.
And before that, I was a big Beatles fan, actually.
Really?
Yeah, even though it was oldies.
Yeah.
But we grew up in a very sheltered private school.
Right.
Where we had to listen to the music of our
your parents, basically.
The parents of the people who were there.
Right.
My brown parents aren't listening to the Beatles. But, people who were there, their parents. So that's where it was kind of like a musical journey. So
you're burning the CD.
Burning the CDs, and the guy who's doing it for me is a Muslim. He's the one who runs this business of making the CDs.
Illegal CD burning, brother, by the Muslim brothers.
So exactly, it's that contradiction, right?
Yeah.
And you don't think about it because you don't hold people to that standard. You're just like, okay, cool. Then he has a book called Islam in Focus on the shelf. It's this little green book.
Wow.
And it's one of those classics. And I'm like, can I borrow this book? Now, most Muslims, like, even though they may not be, as you could say, practicing, or they have their, like everybody does, their own contradictions. But when you start asking about Islam, often they puff up with pride, or like, oh yeah, sure, take it. Don't worry about it, just take it. So I took it and I read it, and I gotta say, it wasn't about what I read that was important, but it's about the act of being willing to read. And that's where I wanted to know more. So I asked a friend, hey, do you have people who can talk to me about this? And that's where I have people who actually met me at like Tim Hortons, at the coffee shop, and like explaining Islam to me, that kind of thing. So it was a while of doing that during my first year of university, where again, I'm still going through a crazy life, in other ways, not following necessarily a pious or holy life at all. But on the other hand, I'm trying to explore. And then there's some very key interactions with Muslims that I don't know what changed my heart, but it's because only Allah knows that, right? But I remember walking through the meeting place of UTSC, the university kind of big hall area, a gathering place. And I walk through and I hear this beautiful voice singing unaccompanied. And I look around and it is a white man and singing in front of a bunch of hijabi brown women. So I'm like, what is that? So I find out later that's Dawood Warnsby. I think this is 2001.
Wow.
No, this is 2000.
Wow, mashallah.
And that's Dawood Warnsby, and it's Islam Awareness Week.
Wow.
And this is back before he, when he was local, and he's singing this song. Why are the drums so silent? Why can't we hear the rhythm? What's wrong with you and I? So, he's singing this song about why are the drums so silent? And it's just like, it's not a religious song, but it appeals to you. It's like, wow. I liked singing. I haven't sang in a long time. But back then I appreciated music. And so I stopped and I said, hey, can I ask you questions about Islam? He said, yeah, here's your card. Here's my card. I never called him. But again, it's just this idea. It's this step.
Wow.
Another time, one time there was an Eid dinner, I think, and I accompanied this friend of mine who, to the Eid dinner, and because I'm Muslim passing, because I'm brown, so I'm Muslim passing. So they're all like, okay, pay the ticket, brother. The MSA is charging a ticket. But then one of the guys at the table whispers to his friend, he's not a Muslim. So and they look and they smile and say, welcome, you don't have to pay a ticket. Come. So I came in, and over there, subhanAllah, there is another musical performance, a vocal song by Nader Khan, who was former, I think, vice president or president of MSA before me. Yeah, but, so again, I'm hearing music, like you're singing, and it actually does soften art. It does soften people's hearts, but people don't think that Islam has those things. So then I felt very kindly treated by the Muslim community. So what that does is that doesn't convince you that a religion is true. What it does is it takes away the blocks in your mind. The stereotypes start falling away. And that allows you to accurately and honestly evaluate the claim to truth. So the heart cannot be against a claim to truth. Otherwise the mind won't be able to work. Right? So when the guard goes down, okay, these are normal human beings. Their gatherings are nice. They're artistic people. They love the same things that we all love. Then I can say, all right, let me really look into this. And that's when I started to actually look into the logic of Islam. And then it really appealed to me because I'm like, okay, one God, great. Because that's the one God I've always felt that I knew, right? Even when you go to any religion, you just say, oh yeah, the Almighty, the higher power. Everyone's in agreement at that point until you start getting into the details, then everyone disagrees. But it seemed like Islam was saying, let's go back to that point that we all agree on. Let's stay there. And then for me, what was significant, even before the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was the presence of Jesus in the Quran.
So you didn't know that Muslims believed in Jesus
I
at that
didn't
time?
know that from that to that level,
Right.
right? So then I'm like, wow, this person who I really love, like he's like the number one religious personality to me before then. And I find that Islam also talks about Jesus.
Yep.
And so there's a big way of being able to tie in religions, and it just makes sense about why Islam is the final message. But there's glimmers of that truth in every single religious tradition. And that's what really drew me, I think, in the end, to Islam, and just learning more about the message of the idea of like one God, right? One creator and one humanity. That's very important because I'd also seen how the idea of, for example, like growing up as a Hindu, although I know that not all Hindus preach this, but there's the idea of caste system. For me growing up, that was I couldn't understand that. I didn't like that.
Well, you're from Scarborough. I mean, like you're from Mark. How could that make sense to you?
Yeah,
you grew up in such a diverse community.
Right, exactly. And the idea, I mean, for most Western minds, we can't understand this idea of people being treated differently because of what they're born into, in terms of like the idea of less rights or less respect. So, and I know that that's not an idea. I'm not trying to, paint the entire community with that.
Yeah.
But it was something for me growing up that I had a question about. So this idea of like the equality of people, the basic respect that's due to all human beings, that was there. Of course, there are historical times in Indian history, for example, and many other histories where Muslims have been the complete opposite of that, actually. They have not represented Islam very well. And it was just a good context for me to understand the religion at its root and what is it really teaching. And then I could look at history and say, wait a second, okay, religion has been misrepresented in every religion. Not every religion has its aspect of being misrepresented, and it's happening today too.
Right.
It's happening, it hasn't stopped. So that's what allowed me to separate between kind of like historic animosity, stereotypes in media. And of course, this is all before 9/11. So the big kind of media thing had not happened.
Right.
So I think it allowed me to investigate Islam fairly. And one day I went to go to a masjid. I just said to myself, it was after exams, and I was like, you know what? I just have to find out more about Islam. And so I took my parents' car keys and went out in the early summer. And I used to do all this exploration by myself. I wouldn't tell it to the girl I liked. Neither was she ever involved in preaching to me, or neither did she ever help me in any way, because she was also doing her own kind of youth kind of Muslim kind of finding your way. So I was on my own. So I said, okay, I'm just going to go to the masjid. And I know there's a new one in Markham that was being built. Back then it was new. And I drove up, and there were cars there at 10 o'clock at night or something. And I'm like, how does this make sense? Like, what is there a service happening? So when I walked in there, as soon as I walked in, I got surprised because a guy was running behind me, and he just kind of scared me. And he's like a guy late for salah, running to catch the prayer. But I'm like, why is he running? So he surprised me. And I turned around, and it's a guy from my high school. And he's like, what are you doing here? Because he knows I'm Hindu. So he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I just came to learn about Islam.
SubhanAllah.
He's like, oh, okay, just come and sit in the back, and the imam will talk to you after. So he's like totally weirded out. Like, what's this guy doing in my place? So he grabs me, and he took me to the front, and I walk into this beautiful, it was a gym, but it was back then the masjid, green carpet, very simple, no pictures anywhere, nothing, no glamour, nothing.
No statues.
Nothing. It was just a green carpet with lines on it. And I come in, and as I'm walking in, I hear like a very Indian accented Allahu Akbar, on a loudspeaker. And I got scared for a second because that's the stereotype that triggers people who are not Muslim. Like, what's happening? And literally for a second, I'm like, are they going to hold me down and force me to do something? So I got scared. I was like,
why is that even an option? Why?
No, because we have so many stereotypes from movies.
Okay.
From media,
Right.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like even in the 90s growing up, there's a
Wow.
lot of stereotypes against Islam. And so I got scared. Like, what is that? Like, hold on, like, just relax. Like, you've read a lot about this, So I sit there, and after the prayer, you see everybody standing in a row, different backgrounds, different types of people, very simple. And then the imam comes to the back, nur on his face, shining, And he sits down with me, and I say he spoke only Urdu, Hindi. He didn't speak English, very little at that time, and of course now he does because he's been here for many years. But he's from India as well, so he sat down. And in my own kind of broken Hindi and English, we sat down and tried to talk about Islam. And a bunch of young boys, make a circle around us because they were sleeping in the masjid, I guess for the, dawah purposes. So they form a ring around us, and I'm just talking to this person, and time goes by. I just don't even know where time goes. But the answers that I'm getting are very satisfying. And they're very simple. But sometimes what you read, you just need to hear it manifested from someone who you believe is righteous, with a true intention to help you. And that's what happened. At the end of it, I asked him a question. I said, how do you become Muslim? And even though I knew it, so I said, how do you become Muslim? And he didn't ask me. He just said, say this. And at that time, I knew I wanted to say it. So he just knew it was the right time. And I knew I didn't hesitate as well. I said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadur Rasulullah. And when I said that, at that point, it was like as if the whole world just disappeared around me. And it was just me and him, and it's just a feeling of, wow, okay, that was amazing. That's it, you're Muslim. Like that, I'm Muslim? I didn't plan on becoming Muslim. But the best things sometimes are unplanned.
Wallahi.
Because as long as it's an honest step, nobody told me to do something. I just felt this was the right thing to do. And he knew when I was asking him, sometimes you ask for information, but sometimes you want someone just to hold your hand and say, look, you're an 18-year-old kid, right? I'm a legal adult, but it's not easy to come from a background where you're going to face all this opposition and a community that's going to really, really dislike what you do. And that's why I felt that it was very gentle, and it was very much at my own pace. And I became Muslim that night, and he said, you can come back on Friday, and, we'll do it in front of people. I never did come back to do that public thing. It was just a very quiet thing, no certificate, no ceremony, no nothing. But that's the simplicity I loved about Islam. It was just that. And somebody went, okay, take him to the sink and teach him how to make wudu type thing. And whenever I go back to that masjid in Markham, which I do every once in a while now to give khutbah, and, when I see the imam walk in, I can't help but think, this is the man on whose hands I took Shahada. And I have to actually stop my khutbah sometimes and just look at him and just acknowledge, and go to the places where the spot where I became Muslim is now a gym. Go to the faucets where I first learned to make wudu. It's just so much history there now for me. And after I became a Muslim, I came home. I didn't tell anybody. And when I told this girl that I liked, she was upset with me because she said, "Why didn't you tell me?
SubhanAllah.
Why didn't you make me part of it? Like, this is something, why didn't you let me know?" And so I said, I did it for myself. I didn't do it for you. And the next time she saw me, she walked in to this place, and I was praying, and she said it was the weirdest thing to see you in the position, what they call, like, when you're doing at-tahiyatu lillah, and your foot is like that certain way.
Yeah.
And it's like to see someone like total non-Muslim to like sitting in that position, going like with your finger up like this. The next time she saw me, she was like, that was just so weird.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah. But at that time, then the rest is, then after that, I learned, and I think that opened up the possibility that, oh, okay, now there's something that can be made of this mutual, admiration. And then at that point, somebody said to me, because you'll always hear the rules somewhere or another. Hey, you can't date in Islam. So I'm like, okay, I don't intend on doing what Islam says you can't do. And I mean, I really, alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, I took Islam very seriously from day one, and tried to learn as much as I can. And then eventually, there's a whole many stories, but later that summer, I decided to hop on a plane, borrow money, get my passport somehow, and hop on a plane and go propose to her parents and say, I'm a kid, but I want to marry your daughter.
Where were her parents?
Trinidad.
Wow.
Yeah, they're from a very practicing family in Trinidad. And because they're also not in the Desi culture, I found that they didn't have the same cultural hang-ups that we thought is Islamic or, cultural, but they're very much like on the merits of the case, right? So I went there, and I remember initially a lot of my Islamic kind of exploration, I would say, it's a midway between me wanting it for myself, but also I need to learn to try to not impress people, but trying to like, whoa, how am I going to do this, right? So I remember I learned a couple of the surahs in case they forced me to lead prayer.
In case they would test you out.
Yeah. And they're like, send them
you
off
want our daughter? You got to know Fatiha at least.
Yeah. No. I was a sincere Muslim, but it's like
Right.
the question was obviously like, hey, how do we know that you're really in this for this? I said, I'm not going back. Like whether I marry your daughter or not, this is what I want to do. I'm not going back.
It's nothing to do with her.
Yeah, nothing to do. I mean, yeah, it's like nothing to do with her. It was just like an occasion of meeting certain people that allows that to happen. And actually, I went there. Yeah, so I went there ostensibly for an Islamic conference in the beginning, but I never ended up going
Islamic
to
conference.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny thing is, whenever my in-laws talk about it, they also say it like that too.
The Islamic conference that never happened.
Yeah, so I think it was really weird. And at that time, they were like, "Well, what do you want to become?" I'm like, "A doctor." So hey, that's a good answer for anybody. Yeah. I never ended up becoming a doctor. My handwriting is still messy. So, but then they said, "Okay, make a plan, make an outline of all these things, and we'll see, how it goes." And I think from there, it just led to, a few months later, it was tough because my parents weren't on board at all, right? They had just learned that I became a Muslim too. It was difficult for them because that was a whole other chapter going on in my house. But later, alhamdulillah, the right thing to do was to get married if you're young people in university off there. And by Allah's grace, we kept, Allah guided us to keep limits, up until that, point. And then we did get married when I was 18 years old in 2001 in December.
SubhanAllah. You got to talk to me about your family, because I can imagine, bringing that news home probably wasn't easy.
No, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. And I didn't say anything at first, but I think they started to see by the way that I made some changes to my life. You know what I mean? The opinions that I started to hold. They began to suspect, like, oh, you're getting really close to your Muslim friends, aren't you? Until it became a point where, like, what are you saying? Like, is everything, like, so you're not eating the same things necessarily. You're not drinking the same things. You're not doing all the same things. You're not the way you were.
Were you like a vegan beforehand?
No, absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
No, absolutely not. I did try vegetarianism,
right?
Because that was something for a year, and then I couldn't hack it.
You're too hungry.
No, it's like it's opposite. I was a carnivore. I was eating everything. Right. So yeah, because you don't have any dietary restrictions. When you're just like a young person, just thinking whatever. So when you start cleaning up your life, there's a clarity of the heart that comes as well, and that brings a type of light that allows you to get into a more moral position in your life, and it just feeds off of each other. So, You quit this and you feel a lightness. You quit that, you feel a lightness. You eat pure, you feel a lightness. You start to pray, you feel a lightness. And that's what draws you in. Islam draws you into itself by the beauty of the changes that occur when you take on its teachings in a gradual and beautiful way, right? And this is exactly what happened to me, where I felt like it's a gradual approach to religion. But when it came out, then I had to say, yeah, I'm a Muslim. And that was where naturally it was a very big shock to my parents. They're wonderful people. My parents have done everything good for me. They sacrificed a lot to educate me, and they showed me a lot of love. And I have a younger sister as well. She's been like my best friend, you know. And so my family are good people. But anybody, if they realized that somebody in their house had changed their faith, it was, you know, it would be very difficult. But they never wronged me. You know, they never hurt me. But they just put the hurt on themselves, which is kind of, it's more sad, right? Almost like if they would have like roughed me up or something, then it gives you a type of, but it's more heart-wrenching when they take it on themselves. And often Hindu families react like this. Different religions and cultures react differently. And I found that Hindus, generally speaking, they react as if it's a personal failure.
Is it more of like a feeling of betrayal? Like they feel like, you know, you've left what we've taught you or our values?
Definitely. Because there's no theological reason for why they want you to stay that. It's identity. It's about, this is what we are. How can you change what we are? Who put you up to this? Who paid you to do? You know, there all kinds of theories, conspiracy theories start coming around, right? And so then the word gets out in the community, and again, more kind of theories and rumors go around. Oh, there's like a girl entrapped him, or the mosque paid him money, and it's like, where's the money? I'm waiting for my payment.
The check's still in the mail, unfortunately.
Exactly. It's like, no, they don't know the Muslim community. You're not gonna get much money. No, but like, you know, so there's gonna be all kinds of rumors that they have to go through now, and that's the hardest part. It's even long after they might accept it that, okay, he's changed, but he's a better person. You know, he's a married man. He has a family, and he still cares about education or work, and he hasn't rejected Western values or something like that. And you know, I think that there's this idea of like the shaman community, right? That you have to kind of help them through by convincing them that you're still the same person. I'm still your son.
You're still your son. Exactly.
I'm still your son. I still love you. I'm still, you know. But it also takes, because you're going through your own journey. So what I realized is a lot of converts, they go through what they call, you know, convertitis, where you get really super conservative. I wouldn't say religious. It's conservatism confused for religiosity. And you get really religious, so you like start rejecting like a lot of things of your past. And you make these changes all at once. And you just become someone that no one can recognize anymore. And that gives more grief to your parents. And I actually advise converts now, like, don't go that way. Yes, it's good for strengthening your faith if you have opposition. So there is always a hikmah, a wisdom for why people go down that route. But then, you know, when it comes down, you get more mature. You start to be able to relax a little bit and start to know how to handle yourself in situations where before you say, I'm never getting in that situation, right? But you know how to deal with people from non-Muslims. But before you feel threatened by everything, you know? So I think it took a lot of time to come down, but those mistakes were already made for those good, you know, 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. SubhanAllah. I mean, of course, you know, changing your family and, you know, giving that news to your family, changing your, you know, your faith. I'm sure it was a lot. But then a few months later, this crazy thing happens in September of 2001, which I'm sure, you know, I mean, everyone has their own 9/11 story. Like I mentioned to you earlier, like my first day of high school was 9/11.
Yeah.
It really impacted and shaped my perspective on faith and my identity. Well, what was your kind of 9/11 journey? Because you said you took Shahada just a few months before 9/11.
Just a few months before. And I thank Allah for that, you know, because I realized that there was still not that kind of public pressure on Muslims, right? The pressure was the stereotypes were more from my background rather than my society where I am in Canada. And like I said, Allah has a wisdom for why everything happens at a certain time. So maybe in Allah's wisdom, if I had taken Shahada or tried to get interested in Shahada after, maybe I would have been too affected by the news around me. Right? I don't know. But alhamdulillah, I was a Muslim for a few months, and it was second year university. You know, turn on the TV. Everyone has that moment. When did you hear about it? You know, it's like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Go to school in the university, and they're like TVs set up in the public area. Yeah, like they just set up public TVs. So something big is happening. You don't know what's happening. Of course, for a while after, when you realize this is all the Muslim community is getting, you know, basically put in the front page. And then it was just like years of relentless war and Islamophobia and surveillance of the community and a lot of stereotypes and a lot of, so it was just a time like anybody else, you know, we all went through it, just hunkering down, and you're using your faith to just say that we're still going to be the best that we can be, even though sometimes you don't feel welcome in the world, you know, and you don't have anybody but each other, and you're scared as a young person. You don't know what's happening. But alhamdulillah, Allah brought us through those years, you know, with the wise leadership of our scholars who are now seniors, right? And just in general, the good faith of good people, even in your society, who know that, okay, we know that it's not everybody is like this. That is that, you know, whatever is done wrong is just a very small sliver of people. So no matter what the news says, we're not going to make this something. So thank God, you know, those years are over. But it was tough because that increased the pressure on my parents from the rest of the community of like, what did your son go and do? You know, and I can remember that where there were issues where my mother, I've heard, like reduced to tears in a gathering of her community where it's like asking, you know, kind of questions that are more there to like needle you, you know, you know. So it was tough, you know, it was tough. But you know, my parents this is why I love them so much, because they never abandoned me. They never left me. There are some parents that would be, you know, I heard of an Indian girl just last week, you know, she was the subject of an honor killing. Like literally brought back to India and killed.
Because
you know?
she took Shahada.
She took Shahada, yeah. And it's not common. I'm not saying it's like something so rampant, but different families will react in different ways. Other families, like, they'll never talk to you again. My parents never ever said, we'll never talk to you again. You know, yes, I had to leave because I was married too. So I did the two things very close. So my parents always say, like, we don't know what upset us most, the fact that you became Muslim, the fact that you got married, or the fact that you didn't become a doctor.
My God.
So yeah, like there's all these like expectations you have of your children.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and I understand that that's human nature. So it's really about also not you know, keeping your composure and your character when people are disagreeing with you. It's a test.
Wallah.
And the Prophet, peace be upon him, he taught us how to behave under pressure. But when you're a young convert, you don't necessarily imbibe those teachings first. You imbibe the outward things first. Grow your beard long, you know, whatever, you know, dress a certain way. You know, so this is why it takes a lot of time, I think, to get to a point where you can go back and say, you know, sorry, mom, dad, you know, I made the decision I made, and I don't regret that, but I do regret sometimes the way I brought it back to you. And now they see the beautiful side of it, the more gentle teachings, and yeah.
So did you end up graduating from UTSC?
Yes, I did.
Yeah,
I finished. Yeah.
You finished. So you're a young graduate. You're married. When did you decide to, you know, take your learning to the next level? Like, I mean, obviously you were probably learning whatever you could locally. Yeah. But where did that kind of leap of taking Islamic studies more seriously occur? Yeah. So I had gotten into, you know the whole like MSA thing. I was MSA vice president, and you know, the only source of information we have is online, and they had like Q&A websites had come up, you know, Islam Q&A, Ask the Imam, and these types of things. So we were trying to gain knowledge in whatever way we could, you know, these cassettes, like sets from scholars, like whole sets of cassettes, you just listen to them, or CDs. So that's how I started studying Arabic as well locally, Sharia program. You know, this is back 2004, I think. And then when I graduated, I got taken on this miraculous journey for Hajj, broke, in debt, nothing. And I just got scooped up and taken like at last minute for Hajj as a guest of one of the princes there. What? Yeah, subhanAllah. It was just like, you could not plan this. It's from Allah. The prince knew you, or? No. So there was a program in Saudi embassies back then. Right. I don't know if they have this, but where they take converts. Right. Okay. For Hajj. Yeah, sure. So I was part of a new Muslim group in Toronto, and we were all a bunch of like new converts who had no family, so to speak, or support. So we made our own little tribe. MashaAllah. Yeah, we made our own little group of people, and I lived with them. Like when I had nowhere to live, me and my wife lived in like a halfway house on Donlands and Danforth in Toronto, where we all had lived together, and we supported each other because we had nobody else. So we made our own little tribe. They were Muslims in the house? No, it's all Muslims. It's a house for Muslims who are converts who don't have a place to live. Does it still exist? No, that ended 20 years ago. Okay. But back then, the convert, because post 9/11, a lot of people became Muslim. Yes. And subsequently,
they were homeless, not homeless,
Wow.
but like they were
Yeah, a
kicked
lot
out of
of
their
people, yeah,
families.
yeah.
They didn't know what to do. And so this group of us, you know, and one of my dear friends who was kind of the head of this kind of new Muslim kind of like group, we had a house that through charitable donations, it was a place where people could go to live, learn Islam, eat together, and just strengthen the bonds together.
Wow,
So I lived there
mashallah.
for a while.
Hmm.
And at that point, I got my first job in business because I switched to business. And somebody applied on my behalf to the Saudi embassy for Hajj. And I think they couldn't believe at first I was a convert because I'm brown. Like, are you a convert? Like, yes, I'm a revert convert, whatever.
Yeah.
And then they said, would you like to go for Hajj? I said, yeah, like, of course. I don't have any money. I'm in student debt and everything. And they said, fine, you know, make it tomorrow morning to Ottawa with your passport, your meningitis thing, your photos, your everything. But I'm like, you're calling me and everything's closed now. How do you want me to get all these things by tomorrow and be in a different city? And they're like, sorry, this is the rule. Like, it's closing tomorrow. The application is closing tomorrow. We forgot to call you back or something like that. So miraculously, by Allah's grace, you know, I just called a friend and every door started opening one after another.
SubhanAllah.
You know, I had no car. How am I going to get to Ottawa overnight? I had no money. I was just a new graduate, just married, like just trying to make ends meet. And one by one, the doctor who I go to for the shot, she's Muslim. So she wants to help. So she's like, okay, I'll stay back after hours, but you have to buy the shot from the drugstore. Drugstores are all closed. So, okay, my husband owns a drugstore. So a Muslim drugstore owner goes, gives me the meningitis shot. I didn't have money to afford that shot. It was like $125. He goes, go for Hajj. Don't worry about it. Gives it to me.
SubhanAllah.
Go back to the doctor, get the shot. And he gave me the photos as well because you could do the photos,
Wow.
the passport photos. And then one brother says, I'll just drive all night with you. And you don't have a car. It's okay. I'll drive all night to take you. And he drove me all night. And we, you know, it was late. We get there morning, Saudi embassy, you know, like really tired, put in the application. And then they go, okay, fine. But you're going to get a call at any random time in the next 2 days and you just got to hop on a plane right away. Like, there's no time. Like, no, we don't know.
Wow.
Then I go back home and then there's the idea of like, how do I step away from my job, leave my wife? Because my wife couldn't come with me because she's not a new Muslim.
Right.
And then all of a sudden they say, okay, I get this call and they say, all right, you're leaving in the next few hours, but you're leaving from New York. I'm like, I'm in Toronto, brother. This call from Saudi. I'm like, brother, Canada and America are not the same country.
Habibi, go to the New York.
Yeah. Like, literally find yourself there. How do you afford a plane ticket? How do you do all this stuff?
Oh my God.
And I'm like, it's within hours. How is this possible? And he said, sorry, this is the ticket we got. If you can make it there, you can join the caravan for Hajj. So this is where, again, Allah opens the door. I don't even know how we got that ticket. But my friend who was on the same trip said some Muslim travel agency or whatever just heard the thing and said, okay, there's a next flight going. Get to the airport now. Don't worry, the tickets, you got the tickets. And we just got on the plane. And alhamdulillah, I did not believe I was there. I just kept on saying to myself, something's going to happen wrong. I'm not there until I get there. And until I closed my eyes and my friend held my hand into the haram for the first time and I opened them and I beheld the Kaaba for the first time and I broke down in tears, that's when I believed that Allah had taken me to Hajj. And that's, from there is where I met a scholar and I said, this is the path I want to follow of knowledge. And that's where, when I came back, it just changed even as a new Muslim, just changed my life completely. I said, I want to study this religion. I went to my employer and I said, I really want to study Islam. And he's a Muslim. And I want to quit my job just after I started it. And he said, no problem. I will support you. Don't ask anybody else. And within a few months, me and my wife wrapped up our jobs and we were off to Yemen first to go study Arabic. Alhamdulillah.
Wow. Everything just fell into place.
Everything does, by Allah's will. But when you're a new Muslim, I think it's just Allah strengthens your faith by showing you things that cannot be coincidences, mere coincidences. But does that because the odds are against someone who's struggling in a society. And so Allah shows you and strengthens your iman in that way that now you realize, whoa, the kind of facilitation and ease and blessing in your path was like, I don't think I would have been able to make it without that. But you're a baby, but you don't realize Allah's holding you the entire time.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah.
Wow. What was what was Yemen like? I mean, that was back in the day before.
Back to the basics.
You know, because that I mean, Yemeni culture and lifestyle. You know,
Yeah.
they're very like, and it's not gonna I don't want to stereotype all of them, but it's a very simplistic.
Very simple culture.
Like yeah,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So what was and you were in Sana'a or
No, I was in the Hadramaut.
Hyderabad?
In a town called Tarim. I had no idea about where I was going or the people I was going to. It was just an advice that was cheap and like, hey, go over there. It was 11-hour bus ride into the desert. Okay.
Wow.
Sana'a was just a complete different experience. I mean, you're talking about places where, you're walking around in the old city and there's still camels grinding people's grains. They're using camels to do that.
Yeah.
Camels like wildly everywhere. When I went, especially when you go out of the main city into the south, cars are very rare. People ride these like little kind of
Mopeds.
kind of like dinky motorcycles. And so it's very much. I mean, you wake up in the morning. It's just our life was. It was like a mix between camping and living in a. So compared to Western life, you let go of a lot of things.
Yeah.
And wake up in the morning, there's like a scorpion in your sink,
What?
Yeah, things like interesting things,
Wow.
So you're just it's just very back to the basics, but the people are so kind.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
So a
mashallah.
Muslim culture, like when you go to see the actual people from the cultures, especially outside of even in cities, but especially in places where remote, they have such big hearts, so much hospitality. I called the place the desert of love. It was like really, the people are so welcoming and warm. And you're learning Arabic because you're in immersion. And that's what we had to learn first, right, before you study. And for my wife and I, it was just an adventure, but also it was like there's just learning so much about Islamic values among people who are not really tainted by the rest of civilization. They're still very simple people. And we got a chance to see that.
And what was that experience like, being immersed in the culture? And how long were you there?
I was only there for 6 months. Before we were expecting our first child, we had to leave. And then we spent a year in the West Indies and Trinidad studying as well. And then we went back out to the Middle East again, to Jordan this time, where I would stay for 12 years.
Wow, subhanAllah. And your wife was with you the entire time, studying as well?
The entire time she was with me. SubhanAllah, students of knowledge, their wives often take, they bear a huge brunt of, so she did study. And mashallah, she learned a lot of things, but she didn't get to do as much because of our children coming, and she gave a lot of sacrifice for me. So I wouldn't have been able to do this, without my wife.
100%,
Alhamdulillah.
100%.
So generally speaking, she was the support that helped me become a Muslim, helped me go study. Literally everything that Allah gave me today is,
Wow.
Allah made a means.
Wow.
Supportive wife.
That's real love right there, mashallah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mashallah. And so having that journey of studying Islam now, I mean, of course, we could talk for hours just about your journey of knowledge, because I can only assume, going from Yemen to Jordan, and maybe just briefly, what was Jordan like? Because I think Jordan was...
So interestingly, like throughout the time, I think I've studied Islam mainly in 3 countries, and Egypt for for visits, and India for just visits. But in the 3 different settings that I've studied Islam, I've studied with many different kind of schools of thought. And so I had a variety of experiences, and my own mind and my thoughts developed through that time to kind of come to where I am today. And so, yeah, Jordan was very nice because Jordan is a cross between Western culture and Eastern culture. It has a lot of like the modern.
I was going to say a little bit more civilized. There's
I don't know about I mean,
maybe that's not the right word.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It's like it's more like developed,
industrialized.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's developed. It has more of the modern things. And I had said this time because Yemen, as much as we loved it, it was hard. It was hard in terms of like being the back to basics. You know what I'm saying? And so I said to myself, one of the tricks is to a long-term staying, because we had to leave because we were my wife was expecting, because medically and stuff is not what you're used to. So we had to go back and then come back. And this time I said, I'm going to take my family, and I have a young child now, I'm going to take my family somewhere where they're comfortable. So rather than thinking about what I want to do, I tried to put my family first. And actually that was a big secret from Allah that He allowed me to see, which is, for students of knowledge, look at stability, look at where you're at. And that's why then for the next 12 years, I was able to study uninterrupted, like, without having to move and leave. And Trinidad as well. I studied for 3 years as well. And so basically the experiences were beautiful. Like the people of Jordan, they're also the Palestinians, Jordanians, they're wonderful people.
Yeah,
and
very
people will
hospitable.
help you. People will call you in for tea. And I never experienced like any racism being Indian or anything. Like, they were very welcoming people. And it was just a wonderful environment where I was able to then study all the subjects I wanted to with numerous different scholars. And like I said, I one of the things I thank Allah for is that I was able to study with different groups, because even, within the Muslim community, there's different kind of like groups and stuff like that. So I got a good perspective on all of those. And so I feel like I can navigate between the Muslim community now. Alhamdulillah.
So 12 years dedicating yourself to studying and being around scholars. What's that transition like now, coming back to Canada? Was there a desire to come back to the West? Like, was there a job opening here? Like, what was that move back like?
So interestingly, one of the things I always did when I studied is I always worked a little bit, because I had to provide for my family. And that was actually for me, again, I believe that was a big blessing from Allah, that I was not, even if I studied full time, I was always earning some money, because work teaches you different things that help you reintegrate when you come back. And eventually I would be working more and more. So I was a director of a language school eventually. It's a very famous language school called Qasid that teaches Arabic. And that idea of learning, and seeking knowledge, but also having to apply it in a job setting. And most of our students were non-Muslims. And I had to go travel around. Even though I was studying, periodically I would go travel to visit different governments who sent diplomats to study Arabic, different universities. Wow. So that actually forced me to start saying, how am I going to balance what I'm learning about as a traditional student, and then in the modern world where I'm traveling to different places. So actually during my studies, I had to balance it with work because I had a growing family. And that really helped me transition back, because I was never always in just one bubble.
Right.
Now what happened was I had made an intention, I'm never coming back to the West.
Wow.
I said, that's it, hijrah, and that's it, I'm gone. But again, Allah has his plans, right? So I never planned to leave. But this last time my wife was expecting, it was with twins, alhamdulillah, and it was complicated because we're much older now. We have a bigger family now. So the doctor said, like, over there, you gotta go back to where you have a medical system that, so on and so forth. And so long story short, we had to pack up from Jordan within weeks after 12 years of our life there, pack everything up, and we left everything there. And we left, and I went to Trinidad, where my wife is from. And there's a madrasa there, the Darul Uloom, where I spent further time, graduated from their program as well. So I kind of did the Arab system and, the Indo-Pak system as well, which I thank Allah for. And then got into studying the first 1 year of learning how to give fatwa. And that was also very eye-opening as well. So after all that, and after pandemic, then finally it was like, well, where am I going to go? I can't go back to Jordan now. The family situation is different. The situation has changed. And I'm ready to my teachers say, ready to go and teach and do other things. So then I got the ability to come back to Canada. So I was like, all right, maybe there's a reason why Allah wants me to come back. And so here I am. And this is where I've been for 2.5 years.
So you were kind of just like almost like a new fob, like you're back to square one, like back to learning Canadian culture and.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of it is just reawakening the things that you left. But there's been there's been about a 16-year gap. Wow. So that 16-year gap, there are a lot of like words that you have to figure out. Like people never said fam when I was, I don't even know if they say it now, but as much. But like we had different lingos and terminologies. Different things came up, like even different products and different stores and different cultural phenomenon. So different politicians came in. I missed the Harper years completely. Oh, I just heard about them.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't miss much, Sheikh. Don't worry. It was bad times here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and may Allah protect Canada and what's going to come in the future.
Yes.
So there are many different things where you have a reintegration phase where you also have to ask yourself, you've been living in a very conservative bubble for a long time. How do you now interact with people and their normal day-to-day problems? And how do you wrestle with the idea of Muslim culture integrating into Western liberal modernity, and what are the fault lines of those things? How do I even dig back to my experiences to make it relevant to people, whether it's in art, music, or whether it's in just like literature, I'm like remembering all these things and bringing them back now. And that's been the the journey.
So this last 2.5 years, kind of being back in Canada and reintegrating yourself in the community, and actually in a leadership position now, because you are an imam and you're teaching and you're giving back. What are some of the common challenges you still see? 16, 18 years later, when you left as a new Muslim, what are some of the challenges you still see happening in our community today?
Oh boy, it's like it could be a whole other podcast on this. Yeah, no, there are challenges that are there, and one of them is we're in flux. We're a community in flux. We're at the meeting point of traditionalism and modernity, and how do our lifestyles, our religious laws, how do our attitudes play out as we encounter modernity? Keeps moving forward, so we wish we could be, okay, now we're like perfectly suited to live in the 90s, but it's not the 90s now. New ideas keep coming up that challenge us. And like whether it's, family values, sexual values, whatever it is, there are new things that keep coming up, new political issues that keep coming up as a community that challenge us again. What is our place as Muslims here? How do we even interact in our families? That's changed. How do you raise your kids? That's changed in the last many years. What is the nature of marriage? That has radically changed, So the community is still going through these growing pains because modernity keeps progressing and we keep finding ourselves on the back foot. So we need to now start, being more proactive and revisiting how we can, first of all, make our families strong and our community strong and contribute to the world around us in a way that's true to Islam and its principles and its rulings.
Have you found yourself, because one thing I've noticed in our community here locally is, it's not sectarian in nature, but you'll have the Hanafi masjid, you'll have the quote unquote, Salafi masjid, you'll have how have you been able to kind of navigate that world?
So that's a very good question. And this may upset different people, but in one sense, when I came here, I decided I'm just exiting this whole group identity business because as a community, we divide ourselves that way. And so, yes, I had exposure to different groups within the Sunni tradition and different schools of thought and everything like that. And I benefited from all the different ones, but I realized that there is a loyalty to the basis of Islam, right? The Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the teachings of all the scholars that you can benefit from without dividing each other. So this is what I decided, that for myself, I'm not going to work in a certain space and pigeonhole myself, even if others want to pigeonhole me. I'm going to work with everybody. I respect, the perspectives that they're coming from, because you have no choice as human beings but to become diverse. Allah says that. The way He created human beings is that they'll always be diverse and multiple opinions. So can I at least say, maybe don't agree with an opinion? Can I respect that opinion? Is it coming just from a different way of looking at Quran and Sunnah? And so that's what I had to say to myself. I'm not going to necessarily follow the narrow ways of my teachers because I have so many different teachers that if I had to follow any one way, I would alienate all the rest of them. So I have to benefit from what is the core of Islam, and that's the work that needs to be done. Not the flag of one group or another over the other. My sheikh is better than your sheikh. My school is better than your school. You see what I'm saying? And that's where I feel like I found the mentorship of some of the more senior scholars here in North America, or not the mentorship, but I would say the guidance where you throw things off of each other as colleagues. I found that very, very helpful because they've been navigating this for longer than I have. I've been back only for 2.5 years. They've been back for 10, 20 years. And I really found that everyone now is coming to this common platform. The debates of the 90s and the early 2000s are done, You can follow what you follow and everyone's cool, pray together or whatever. And no one's calling each other to anything other than Islam.
Allahu Akbar. I mean, especially when you consider the fact that collectively we're all under attack. Right?
Yeah.
And this is not even just post 9/11. This is the world we live in today with the rise of Islamophobia. I think strategically we need to find more that brings us together than divides us, because it's ultimately going to be our own downfall.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this whole, you have the debates, Sufi Salafi debates. You've got the Jamaat and the Tabligh and Ikhwani, this and that. All these debates that took place, you're right. I think that world events have, societal events have shown us that you need to work together. You need to drop some of the ideological hard lines and insistence, but also because it doesn't benefit the youth. The people who fall through the cracks, two types of people, are those who are searching in dawah, and then youth and families who they don't benefit from that discourse of dividing each other. As one friend said, scholar, actually Sheikh Naved said this, mashallah. He said, yeah, he goes, right now, because there's a sense of being under pressure, everybody works together, but when that goes away, we'll all go back to fighting each other. We laughed about that. It's a joke, but that's what we have to say at this time. Learn those lessons of unity and what you can agree on, so that when things do become back to a time where, that we don't use that to divide each other. It's very important. He was
now,
right. Yeah.
if there was a young person watching right now, maybe early in their journey of knowledge, maybe a new Muslim, maybe a person who, wants to take that leap of faith like you did, what advice would you have out there for the budding student of knowledge, the person who maybe wants to get, neck deep into studying Islam the way that you did?
Yeah. It's funny because the advice that you give now, it's from my perspective, but from a young person's perspective, sometimes they need to just jump all in. Otherwise, the dunya distracts them too much. And sometimes, students of knowledge, they tend towards like a real conservative type of practice of Islam that then cool down when they get married and you have kids and everything. Then, okay, fine, we'll play a little soccer or we'll go, eat at a restaurant. But in the beginning, it's like, we got to be really hardcore. What I would advise my younger brothers and sisters is try to look at those who have come before you, and they are not like weak or diluted or light. They just have a lot of experience. So benefit from the journey that they went through, so that you don't have to go through these ups and downs and make mistakes and then come back to a middle ground, because you will peter out into moderation. But I would say that the way that you prioritize things, so often we prioritize very outward aspects, which are obviously they're good to be there, but we don't work on our character. We don't sort out the things that are from our childhood in one sense, because I'm also a counselor, so I also kind of bring this aspect into it of, there's things that we're running away from sometimes, or we're wrestling with.
Unresolved traumas.
Unresolved things. And it's like sometimes religion can be the perfect way to like mask all that, and you get really religious, but you're hiding these things. Try to balance and look at where you have your weak points and try to work on those too. So if there's anger, let Islam, which has beautiful teachings about anger, help you with your anger problem. If it's in a former addiction, if it's just sadness as to what happened, let that heal you wholly and entirely. And then it will make it easier when you're learning to understand and be empathetic to the person that you are teaching. Because otherwise what happens is you don't have empathy sometimes, because you're not even giving empathy to yourself, which is why sometimes people who are newly religious, they seem very stern, but it's because they're imposing that on themselves as well. So it comes out on other people. Like if I have to be so hard on myself, I'm going to be hard on you too.
Right.
Go easy on yourself and understand that Islam is very beautiful and takes things gradually, step by step. Look at the teachings of your senior scholars in this context, not somewhere else. Because what will happen is you'll be trying to imitate, and you'll try to be, Arabian, you'll try to be Pakistani, you'll try to be everything abroad. And then you find that you don't fit in. There's going to be a hard time readjusting. Be a Muslim where you are aware of your society and culture. Look at what the scholars have done to integrate Muslims into the community. Build off of that, and you'll have an advantage.
Inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you and your family, Shaykh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow more talab al-ilm to emerge from our community here, and more even Canadian born Muslims who now can relate to the youth and people who are coming down the line. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless our youth, and may Allah azza wa jal bless all of you for watching. Thank you so much for enjoying this episode of the Muslimi Experience. Make sure you stay tuned, subscribe to all our social media platforms for more great content coming down the pipeline soon. I'm your host, Brother Boonaa Mohammed, signing off. Jazakallah khair. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.